Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Two Doors podcast. I am here with Simon Smiley Andrews. Simon is a seasoned technical leader with over a decade of experience in iOS development and managing large engineering teams. Currently at ANZX, he is a chapter lead and was previously leading a team of 270 software developers across Australia at NCS Group, driving his team to meet their client needs and delivering impact business outcomes. Simon excels at solving complex problems and delivering high-value projects. He's passionate about supporting his software engineers, bridging the gap between technical and business teams, and driving his team to achieve excellence in architecture and code quality. Known for his deep technical expertise and empathetic leadership, Simon balances caring support with direct challenges, fostering a culture of continuous improvement and innovation. Welcome to the podcast, Simon.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm very excited for this. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversations. And I mean, leading a team of 270 is no small feat, right? And like where you're at now, it's like I feel that you're a person that loves to just keep learning, pushing and innovation.
Yeah, it's interesting with having a team that large because it kind of boggles your mind. But actually, when you do it everything then splits up. I had a fantastic team of practice principals that worked underneath me. And if I really look at it, they were the ones that had the hardest jobs. They had lots and lots of people. And so, I mean, I was very lucky my job was mainly supporting them and fine-tuning them and really just being there if they needed me. And that's the thing. When you think of the scale, one person leading that size of a team, you can't understand it, but it's not. No one can know that many people. And so then each team splits down into smaller and smaller chunks into a more manageable group that you can actually lead and support.
And how do you lead leaders? Like, is there a recipe? Is there a playbook of principles?
No. And it is, I mean, I suppose that's what everyone who is leading people is trying to work out. It's very hard because everyone, as soon as you're leading leaders, they need to work out how they are going to lead. I can't say, okay, everyone into the room, I'm going to teach you how to be just like me. And when A happens, you need to do B. And when C happens, you need to do D. Okay, now you're a leader. And that was the most difficult part, is saying, well, what kind of a leader do you want to be? What are the outcomes that we want to deliver? What are the people that you have? And do you enjoy it? And how do you approach it? And I think it's interesting. As a leader, you need to make decisions. And one of the hardest things to teach people is how to make confident decisions and to trust themselves. And that's kind of part of it, learning and knowing that you're people, and then slowly welcoming them forward to say, yes, you're in a safe space. You can make decisions. You've got a big team. It's important things that we do. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that you just have to always err on the side of caution for every single thing you do.
And a big thing that I feel a theme that comes from you is decisiveness. It's having that, and that's what a leader is, right? It's like having the courage. We had Kate Giovanni on the team. She leads a big team in Xero, and she was saying that you just have to be vulnerable, and I asked her, how do you be vulnerable? She said it's about having courage. And it's like saying, look, I don't know all the answers, but I'm going to be decisive and keep moving forward.
And I'll say this a lot to my team: make a decision. If it's the wrong decision, it will eventually come back to me. But as long as you've made the right decision at the time for the information you have, that's the best that you can do. Because if something changes a week later, hindsight is fantastic but you can't say, oh, well, you should have done something else based on the information we didn't have for a week. And so, it is a balance. You shouldn't just we're not rushing to make decisions. But at the same time, it's understanding, well, what time frame do we actually have? I've worked on so many projects where we went, okay, this is probably the decision that we need to make. The leadership team prevaricated, and a week later we go, well, we'd love to make that decision now, but we can't because we don't have time. So now we need to make another decision, but that's not really the decision we want. Therefore, let's spend a week exploring that decision. Oh, now if we could only have last week's decision, that would be so much better than this decision, which is going to the client and maybe saying that we need to push the deadline back. So yeah, it's making a decision within the time frame that you have. Once you make a decision, and it's the interesting part, being a senior leader in a team, I was in a team of about 12 directors who then reported up to our senior director. And so you're in a team whilst leading a team, and you also then have to make a decision and then row in the right direction. I always remember watching The Apprentice, and I was amazed at how when the leader said, this is what we're doing, there'd be so many people that would say, no, I don't want to do that. I disagree. I don't think it's the best thing. And they'd row in the wrong direction. And then like you can't do that. You just have to commit to something and then put everything behind it. If it's not your decision, if you don't agree, that's okay. The point is being unified as a team. And so that's part of what you're trying to do is, I feel as a leader, listen to your team, pull all the information that they have that you don't, make a decision, and then stick to that decision to some extent, not religiously, but there needs to be more information that comes in to make you change course.
And I was going to ask you what makes a good leader, but I think you've just actually answered that from the encouragement part and the active listening part and the decisive. But how do you grow leadership? How do you build it in other people?
It's interesting. I used to play a lot of very high level sport, and we had this concept of hard cheese and soft cheese. And so there were some people that when they were playing sport, if they did something wrong, you'd shout at them, and they were hard cheese. So that would make them work harder. And there were some people that were soft cheese, and if you shouted at them, then they'd wilt. And there was you didn't want to be one or the other. You just had to understand who you were, so that then as the leader, you could deal with the people in the way they needed to be dealt with. Because shouting at someone who then wilts and then blaming them is backwards. You need to understand everyone in your team. And I think that's similar with leadership. There are some fantastic leaders who are hard asses, and they say, I'm staying until 10 o'clock at night, and that's what I expect of you. But underneath that, it's clear expectations. They do not pretend that there's a bar and then change it. So clear expectations, this is what you need to do to succeed. The people in their team can then decide if that's the kind of person they want to be under. For me, I prefer a softer approach. I think that people flourish when they're given support and when they're given that, space to be able to do it on their own. But also knowing that, walking on a tightrope and saying, well, if I fail, then I'm going to get fired or I'm going to get shouted at, means that you're not going to step out very far. You're not going to do much. And so, but at the same time, it's that a lot of the managers and leaders I had, they pushed me further because they said, we know that you're ready to do this. You would quite like to have an extra year just confirming it. In a year, you'll feel ready, but you're ready right now. So we're going to put you in that position and we're going to support you, and we're going to take it a little bit more slowly. And you will then see yourself, you'll be a year further forward.
And that's human nature though, isn't it? We never think we're ready, but it's just taking that step and putting all the chips on yourself, going, I'm going to gamble on myself and I know that I will learn and I'll grow. Because right now, the climate of technology, it's rapidly changing. And it's like, how do you surf on this wave, build discernment and actually utilize these tools?
Well, I suppose that's an interesting thing, and it feeds into what kind of leader are you? And it's what ANZX does very, very well with allowing, so chapter leads, there is no one chapter lead. There are very technical chapter leads. There are people chapter leads. There are business ones. And so immediately when you come in, they say, well, what kind of chapter lead do you want to be? Let's support you. You might not even know. Let's support you to find that rather than shoving you into a box. But with the wave and change of technology, the very technical, to be a very technical leader, you almost need to have that technical knowledge. You can't go, okay, well, I'm a leader. I want to now be a leader in AI. So I'm going to do a couple of courses online and now I'm an AI leader. Because when you're working with technical people, that might work at a salesy level, but it won't work when you are in a team of software developers that go, well, you don't have the knowledge and understanding to be part of this conversation, you have almost a top level view. And it's also a difficult part of being a leader. You do have to decide, do I want to be a leader or a technical person? Because the more senior you get, you don't have time. If you've got a team of 250 people or more, or even less, a team of 50 people, you're not going to be keeping up to date with the tools. You're not going to be coding for 40 hours a week. And so you might be able to, 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week here and there. But at some point, there is that decision of saying, well, do I want to go down the leadership track? And especially to, team development and strategic leadership. Or do I want to go down that technical track, which is a different one, and you're still a leader, a different kind of leader, but you will be spending a lot of your time doing software development, learning, upskilling yourself, and so it does then change the mix of leadership that you have to doing.
And I feel that you've also shared in the past about it's about empowerment and empowering your people as well. And I love the point about the cheese. I've never heard that. That was fantastic, because what really helped me was knowing about personalities. So I followed the Personality Plus model, which is like, we've all seen the choleric, which is like that leader that's, no, I'm not going to listen to everyone. And they normally do really well with phlegmatic, which is the cool as a polar bear's toenail. Like, they're people you think are high on that sweet supply because they're so chill. And then you've got the melancholy, which is that strive for perfection, but they're geniuses. And they go really well with the sanguine, which is life and soul of the party, great with storytelling and everything. And so I've never thought about it from the cheese concept. So I love that. And switching gears, that I really want to touch on what you spoke about earlier about being able to relay technical information to non-technical people. What would you advise people that are stepping into that realm of building that as a skill? Because it's a skill, right?
Yeah, I suppose all of the initial thing is having a very deep understanding of the technical. To teach something, you only realize how little you know when you start trying to teach it, to actually explain it. There's also, a lot of communication just around enjoying. Like, a lot of technical people don't necessarily enjoy not dumbing things down, but simplifying things and explaining it to maybe sales or clients or stakeholders, and understanding both sides of that. Because the classic is when you come to a software developer and you say, we've got this really complex design, can we build it? And the software developer says yes. And underneath that, the answer is, we can build anything. Like, that's like, should we build it? No, kill it with fire. But can we? Yes, of course I can build it. If you've got like time and money, I can build anything. And so it's that communication and that translation, that when a client is saying, I want this, actually you need to be able to stand up to them and look at what they're building and understanding their budgets and their timelines. What are their metrics for success? Well, these are your success criteria: fantastic latency, maybe accessibility, the design. Are the things that you're doing now going to get you there? Or are you just kind of stuck in for the shiny things? And on the other side, with the developers, you need to understand how they work and how they approach things, because you can't just say, well, okay, rip that up, we're going to do something else on the whim of a client. You need to respect their time and their craft, and the fact that they, might spend 2 years building this thing. And so it's being between, and a lot about what your job as a leader is balancing what the business wants and then what your software development team wants. Because again, you can't just crack the whip and say, well, I'm the boss, you do what I say. You need to understand their career aspirations. Do they enjoy the work? Do they enjoy the work at the moment, but we're coming into a boring, doing analytics at the end is notoriously boring. And it's just that fine path. And it's probably one of the most difficult things about being an empathetic leader, is that you can't learn empathy. It's more difficult to learn. And so rather than, my advice then to leaders is to understand what kind of leader they are suited to and want to be, because just like I could not be an authoritarian leader, all I would make myself is miserable if I tried. Other people, if you don't, it's okay not to really deeply care about your team. You can still be a fantastic leader, but you will have other areas where you will really flourish and thrive. And it might be that someone that you bring into your team, someone that really, really cares and can supply that to the team. I enjoy that part, but there are going to be other parts where I'm really lacking. And so I bring people into the team in my hiring and in the support structure around it, because one person, you cannot be everything to your team. You just will be like a cornerstone. And then you need to build that team up with your hiring and the support of your people to have a really well-rounded leadership team that you work with.
And it's also not about being perfect, is it? This is something that I had to battle a lot with. And like the biggest leaders and the biggest people in success have failed most or more than other people. And it's learning who you are, how to manage yourself, and then how to interact with others, I find fruitful. And so is there other types of leaders? You were saying empathetic and authoritarian. Are there many other more types?
I mean, there's everything in between. On your point, like, don't let perfect be the enemy of good is a good saying, because you can spend so long that you don't get anything done. I mean, most of the buzzwords for leaders are the extremes. I think that actually a leader, the definition of a leader is just someone that you follow. And you can have very quiet leaders who are technically excellent. It's you have, everyone is a leader in different parts of their role. You can have tech leads. You can have, if you're onboarding someone, you might be a leader for juniors. There's so many opportunities to take more leadership opportunities within your role. And so those are the ones that if you look at Elon Musk or, the big personalities that you get, that is a certain type that will pull themselves to the front, a certain type of leader. Often you characterize leaders as the loudest person in the room, or that's who floats to the top, who makes their opinions heard the most. But it's when you start looking at a team and saying, well, who has the most respect? Who do people go to for support? Who do people, who steps in when everything's broken? And so then, it doesn't really help then saying, what kind of leader do you want to be? It's more saying, what do you enjoy doing? What do you get drawn to? Do other people align with that? Do you notice that people are coming along too? And then kind of building on that, rather than trying to force yourself down a route, because eventually you're going to get to a point where it just doesn't align with you. Similarly, like everyone gets to their leadership position have you heard the concept of being promoted to one level above your competency level? So you could be really, really good. And so you're so good, you get promoted. And you're really, really good then as well. You're a tech lead, so you get promoted. You will keep getting promoted until you're not really, really good at what you do. And then you stop. And so that's maybe where you stay for the rest of your career. Whereas actually what you should have done is stayed at the level below, because you were excellent at that. You were so good that you got promoted. And so again, that's something with leadership. It's, an upward trajectory isn't necessarily the best trajectory. Spreading, going sideways, following what you enjoy, that then is what leads to success, rather than going after money or, team size or other kind of characteristics of a role.
And it's all a skill, right? Like what came to mind there was authenticity. I love that you were like, you didn't go, it's this name, because it's dangerous, isn't it? It's like someone listening to this or watching, they'll be like, oh, I need to be like that. But you're actually just saying, be who you are. And I love the other point you made, which is the loudest person in the room, they can get a certain amount of distance, but then it caps. Like leadership is a skill, it's an art, and learning that. And if we talk more about technology, Simon, like, so where do you see the future of technology going? Obviously, you've been in the mobile space, so you've seen, Objective-C, Swift, you've seen these platforms come out. Like, where is the future of technology going?
A fool wouldn't say AI is the biggest disruptor at the moment. And it's interesting because as someone who does software development using things like Copilot, it's not very good. Like it's kind of equivalent to a smart search engine. But you couldn't build anything that actually stands up. You can't build enterprise level apps. It can't do it for you. But at the same time, we are a year into AI hitting the mainstream. And so that's more the interesting thing, that if you said, well, in 20 years, where will we be? Probably in a very different position to where we are now. I think personally, and you always have bad takes that come back and bite you, but it would be interesting to see if we move past the mobile technology, things like the AI pin and ones that are trying to move a personalizable AI onto, maybe a pin on your jacket or onto a wristband. I don't see personally them having a huge amount of advantage over a small phone that fits in your pocket. Especially if you need to be smaller, then you can have foldable phones, and especially when that then separates an AI just sitting on you. Personally, I don't have a huge amount of interest in asking an AI what the weather's going to be like, because it doesn't really revolutionize how I work. It's interesting with banking, for example, because the more technology that the software developers have, at the same time, the more that people that are trying to scam people out of their money have as well. And fraud and scam detection is absolutely huge at ANZ. Lots of really, really smart people looking at it constantly to say, okay, well, how do we stay ahead of it? How do we stop people from losing their money? And to that extent, there's going to be a lot of things that you can't just say, well, okay, now we're going to have one person that's, just everyone's replaced by AI, because you still need the thought, you still need the UI and the UX, you still need how do you build it, how do you test it, and then you need the certainty of people putting it together. But it is a very interesting time. But in the past, new technology has generally made more jobs rather than less jobs. And so that's probably where I see the most potential of putting. It's really exciting to think that you can give someone that doesn't have a software engineering degree and then hasn't spent 10 years learning how to do software development, they can get interested and excited, and they can build, get a live server up, get some APIs running, build a basic front end, and build their own website. It doesn't mean that then those websites are going to take on Amazon and Google, but it does give them the tools to be able to explore and investigate. And it's a little bit like with sport. If you have 1 million people playing a sport, the top of the pyramid will be a little bit higher than if you have 100,000. And so similarly, if you have a very accessible technology to the masses, we're just going to get very, very interesting things that are built. And that top of the pyramid, there'll be a lot more at the bottom of the pyramid, which are just making rubbish websites. But there's also a lot more at the top who are then able to do things that interest them.
That's brilliant. Yeah, there's a lot of gimmicks that can come out there from, I use an Oura Ring, which is fantastic. So it's like, but they're all gimmicky, isn't it? It's like, well, how can technology help humanity? And I love the point about jobs as well, Simon. And so bringing this into land, have you got any imparting thoughts or wisdom that you'd love to share with the audience?
I think, so when you were talking about empowerment, there's in probably one of my favorite books, which is Turn the Ship Around. They talk about empowering and leaders empowering their people. And the point that really stuck with me was, if someone is needed to empower someone else, then it's not empowerment. If I empower you, then you are by definition not empowered, because you require me to provide the empowerment for you to flourish. And so I think that's what I've seen with the best teams that I've worked with. It's leaders that find a way to allow their people to do their jobs, to have responsibility, and then to, almost the leader to be there if needed, rather than at every point to double check. And so, yeah, empowerment is more for me about letting go and having your people coming to you and saying what they're going to do rather than you telling them what to do. And them having that confidence in themselves and in their jobs and in the support that they're given to be able to get things done. And when you do that and work with really great people, it's amazing then how many conversations you have where they come to you and they literally say what would have come out of your mouth. This is what I'm going to do. And you can feel real pride and say, that is exactly what I would have told you to do. And if we look back 6 months, you wouldn't have done that. Look at where you are now. You know, what a fantastic job that you're doing. And that's then, as a leader for me, that's what makes it all worthwhile is seeing someone grow into the leader that you know that they can be with that model of kind of support and care and from a lead.
That's fantastic. That's a great place to finish it. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Simon. It's been honestly a game changer. So anyone listening, please go back over and listen some of that wisdom that Simon just shared. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show.
No, thanks very much for having me.